Parents, what's a promise you kept that made everyone mad? The promise I kept was a promise to my daughter Marigold when she was 9 years old. The thing about my daughter is that she was a kid who'd been bullied at school for 2 years. The kind of bullying that wasn't a single bad incident. The kind that was a slow drip every single day. The ringleader was a girl named Octavia. Octavia's mother, Persephone, was on the school PTA. The PTA president, in fact. The kind of mother every other mother knew not to cross. I reported it. 3 teachers. The principal, the district. Every report was addressed by being shelved. On a Tuesday in October, Marigold came home with her haircut. The thing about the haircut was that Marigold wasn't the one to get it. Octavia and 2 other girls had gotten my daughter alone in the bathroom and cut off the bottom 6 inches of her hair with classroom scissors. My daughter, who had been growing her hair for 4 years for a competition she'd been training for. The school's response when I called was that they were very concerned and would be having conversations, that they couldn't be certain it was intentional and didn't want to label any child as a bully without due process, that they hoped we could resolve this between the families. I sat down with my daughter that night, holding her hand, telling her 2 things. The first was that I loved her. The second was a promise. I promise you that I will make this stop. Not the school, me. I don't know what it will look like. I don't know how long it will take, but I promise you that you will not have to keep being hurt by these people. Will you let me do whatever I need to do, even if other people don't understand it? My daughter nodded. The dumber she thinks I am, the more rope she'll hand me. I didn't confront Persephone. I did the patient thing. I started, that same week, documenting everything. Every incident at school, every social media post, every parent who quietly told me their kid had been targeted by Octavia too. By the end of 3 months, I had a folder of 19 families in our small school whose kids had been hurt by the same girl, with the same parent shielding her, with the same school administration declining to act. I started with 2 other mothers, an organized group, not a Facebook group, a formal parent committee, properly registered, with quarterly meetings and minutes, the existence of which the district could not ignore. We started attending school board meetings, 3 of us at first, then 7, then 15. We started speaking, on the record, with documentation, at public comment. The district hated us. Persephone hated us more. She tried to have us removed from PTA, tried to have us removed from school grounds, tried eventually to have a restraining order placed against me personally for harassment. The harassment claim, when I quietly retained counsel, didn't hold up. The local paper covered the 3rd school board meeting, then the 5th. The district had a problem on its hands. The principal of my daughter's school was quietly transferred at the end of the year. The assistant superintendent in charge of bullying response was being replaced. A new policy, with mandatory documentation and investigation timelines, was adopted district-wide. Octavia was moved by her parents to a private school. The change wasn't fast. The change took 18 months, during which time every other PTA mother was freezing me out of every committee, every fundraiser, every event. My husband told me more than once that I was ruining our social life over a haircut. My own mother told me I was embarrassing the family. My mother-in-law told me I was becoming impossible to be around. My daughter told me, at the end of those 18 months, that I was the only adult in her life who'd done what I said I'd do. That mattered more to me than every other voice. The promise was kept. My daughter finished middle school, went on to a great high school, made it to a state competition for her formerly cut hair team 3 years later. But here's the thing. 6 years after that haircut, when Marigold was 17, I got a phone call from an attorney I didn't know, who was representing the estate of Persephone, who had died that summer of a sudden illness, that her will had a small bequest to me, with a sealed letter that I would need to come to her office to receive. So let me take you back to that Tuesday night in October, because you need to understand what it actually looked like. Marigold walked through the front door and she didn't say anything at first. She just stood there with her backpack on, and I could see it before she even turned around. The back of her hair was just wrong, choppy, uneven, like someone had taken dull scissors and hacked at it. I didn't scream. I just said her name, and she started crying. I took her into the bathroom because I thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. It was worse. I sat down on the bathroom floor with her, and I held the ends of her hair in my hands. 6 inches gone. 4 years of growing it out, gone. I asked her what happened, and she looked at the floor and said, "They said I looked better this way." My chest got tight. I asked her who said that. She told me it was Octavia and 2 other girls. They got her alone in the bathroom during a break. They had classroom scissors. I asked her if a teacher saw what happened, and Marigold, my 9-year-old baby, looked at me with this flat, tired expression that no 9-year-old should have and said, "The teacher said I probably shouldn't have been in the bathroom alone." I want you to sit with that for a second. The adult response was to tell her she shouldn't have been there by herself. That was the moment something shifted inside me. Something colder than rage. Something more patient. I called the school first thing the next morning. The principal had this voice, the one where every word has been chosen by a lawyer somewhere. She said, "We take all reports seriously and will be having conversations with the students involved." I asked what conversations meant. The principal said, "I'm not at liberty to discuss disciplinary actions regarding other students." I said, "My daughter's hair was cut off her head. In your building." There was this pause. Then the principal said, "We understand your frustration, but we can't be certain this was intentional." Not intentional. 3 girls cornered my daughter in a bathroom with scissors, and the school was standing there telling me they couldn't be certain it was intentional. That was the moment I understood. The system wasn't broken. It was working exactly how it was built to work. It was built to protect the school from liability. It was not built to protect mine. So that night I sat down next to Marigold on her bed. I held her hand, and I said, "I promise you I will make this stop. Not the school. Me. I don't know how long it will take, but you will not keep getting hurt by these people. Will you let me do whatever I need to do, even if other people don't understand it?" Marigold looked at me for a long time. Then she nodded. That nod was all I needed. The next morning I started, not with anger, with a notebook and a folder and the most boring, careful work you can imagine. I documented everything. Every incident Marigold had reported over the past 2 years, every email I had sent to teachers, every response I got back, and every time I got no response at all. I printed out every single one. I made a timeline, and then I started doing something the school didn't expect. I started talking to other parents, quietly, one-on-one. The first mother I asked, a woman I barely knew from Marigold's class, went pale. She said, "How did you know?" Her daughter had been targeted for months. She had reported it twice. Nothing happened either time. By the end of 3 months, I had a folder with 19 families. families, 19, in our small school. That's when I knew it wasn't enough to just have a folder, so I got together with 2 of the other mothers and we formed a formal parent committee with a chairperson, which was me, so clean, so organized, that the district could not wave us away. And then we started showing up to school board meetings. The first time, it was just the 3 of us. I stood up with my papers and I read my statement into the record. I was shaking, but my voice was steady. The second meeting, we brought 7 parents. The third meeting, 15. Each one stood up during public comment with their own documentation. And every single time I stood up to speak, I could see her, Persephone, sitting in the back row on the other side of the room. She never said a word to me. She just watched. The retaliation started almost immediately after that third board meeting. Persephone didn't come at me directly. That wasn't her style. Within 2 weeks, I was dropped from the volunteer list for the fall fundraiser. Then I was taken off the planning committee for the winter concert. Then I stopped getting emails about classroom events altogether. It was like someone had just erased me from every list. And it wasn't just the official stuff. The other mothers stopped texting me back. Group chats I had been in for years just went silent on my end. One night, I got a text from a mother I had been close with for almost 4 years. She wrote, "I believe you, but I can't be seen with you right now. Persephone has too much pull." I read that text 3 times, then I saved it. The next thing Persephone did was petition the school to have me and the 2 other organizing mothers removed from school grounds. She claimed our presence was disruptive to the learning environment. The principal sent me a formal letter on school letterhead. The letter strongly suggested that I limit my campus visits to scheduled parent-teacher conferences only. I brought the letter to my attorney. I had quietly retained one about a month earlier. My attorney read the letter and said, "This is unenforceable, but they're hoping you don't know that." I didn't back off, but the hits kept coming, and the worst ones didn't come from Persephone. They came from inside my own house. One night, Colton and I were sitting at the dinner table. Marigold was already in her room doing homework. He put his fork down and said, "You're ruining our social life over a haircut." I stared at him. Then I said, "Our daughter was held down in a bathroom and had her hair cut off her head. That's not a haircut." Colton shook his head. He said, "I'm not saying it wasn't wrong. I'm saying you've made your point. At some point, you have to let it go." I put my fork down. I said, "When did you decide our daughter's safety had an expiration date?" He didn't answer. That dinner was the loneliest I have ever felt while sitting across from another person. Then my mother got involved. Mallory called me on a Saturday morning. She said, "You're embarrassing the family. People are talking." I took a breath and said, "What are they saying?" Mallory said, "That you're obsessed, that you won't let it go, that you're targeting another mother." I said, "I'm protecting your granddaughter." And my mother, without missing a beat, said, "There are quieter ways to do that. Quieter." She wanted me to be quieter. And I thought, this is why bullies win, because everyone around the person fighting back keeps telling them to do it more quietly. Robin, my mother-in-law, didn't even bother calling me directly. She told Colton, who told me later that night like he was delivering a weather report. He said, "My mom says you're becoming impossible to be around." So at that point, I had my husband telling me I was ruining things, my mother telling me I was embarrassing the family, and my mother-in-law telling my husband I was impossible. And I was still showing up to board meetings, because I promised her I would. Then Persephone played her biggest card. She filed for a restraining order against me. Harassment, she claimed. She said I was targeting her, following her, making her feel unsafe. I found out when I got the papers. My hands were shaking when I called my attorney. My attorney pulled the filing, read through it, and told me to take a breath. She said, "This won't hold up," but she's banking on the process itself scaring you into stopping. I asked her, "What do I do?" And she said, "You show up, you respond, and you don't stop." So I showed up. I walked into that courthouse and I sat through the hearing while Persephone's attorney tried to paint me as some kind of unhinged stalker. My attorney responded with every piece of documentation, showing that I had never once contacted Persephone directly. The judge denied the restraining order. I walked out of that courthouse and I got into my car and I sat there in the parking lot and I cried. Not because I was scared, I was tired. The thing that broke me in that parking lot wasn't the hearing. It was that when I picked up my phone, there was nothing. No text from Colton asking how it went. No missed call from Mallory. Nobody in my life had even thought to check on me. I sat in that car for 20 minutes. Then I wiped my face, started the engine, and drove home because I still had a promise to keep. The months after that were a slow grind. It wasn't dramatic. It was meeting after meeting after meeting, but the pressure was building and the district knew it. The board members who used to look bored during public comment started taking notes. The principal of Marigold School was quietly transferred at the end of the school year. The assistant superintendent who had been in charge of the district's bullying response was replaced over the summer. And then the big one. The district adopted a new policy, a real one, with mandatory documentation requirements for every bullying report, with investigation timelines that actually had deadlines. I sat in the meeting when they voted on it, and I watched every single hand go up. And Octavia's parents pulled her out of the school. They enrolled her in a private school across town. I heard about it from another mother. Persephone certainly didn't tell me. Through all of this, every board meeting, Persephone never spoke to me, not once. She would sit in the back row, and I would sit on mine, and she would watch. The night of the final board meeting, the one where the new policy was officially ratified, I drove home feeling something I hadn't felt in 18 months, like putting something heavy down. I walked through the front door, and Marigold was sitting on the couch. She was 11 now. She looked up at me when I came in, and she didn't ask how the meeting went. She just waited. I sat down next to her, and I said, "It's done. The policy passed. Octavia's gone. The principal's gone." I thought she might smile. She didn't. She sat there for a moment, looking at her hands, and then she said very quietly, "You're the only adult in my life who did what they said they'd do." I pulled her into me, and I held her so tight. And while I was holding her on that couch, I could hear Colton moving around upstairs. He hadn't come down. He didn't ask about the meeting. And I thought about Mallory, who wanted me to be quieter, and Robin, who told my husband I was impossible. And I thought about what my 11-year-old daughter just said to me. And I decided right then that those words from my kid were worth every single one of those people. 5 years went by. Marigold grew up. She's 17 now, and she's doing so well it makes my chest hurt in the good way. She's on a team that made it to a state competition. Her hair has been long and healthy for years. As for the rest of my life, I rebuilt some of it, not all of it. Colton and I are still together. We function. But something between us never fully healed. He never apologized. Not once. We just moved forward like two people walking in the same direction who stopped holding hands hands somewhere along the way. Mallory stopped bringing it up. She never said I was right, but she stopped saying I was wrong. Robin is polite to me now, so that's where things were. 5 years of quiet, and then my phone rang on a Thursday afternoon. It was an attorney, a woman with a calm voice who said she was calling on behalf of an estate. She said, "Mrs. Neves left a small bequest in your name, and a sealed letter." I didn't say anything for a few seconds. I just stood in my kitchen, trying to make the words make sense. Mrs. Neves, Persephone. The attorney explained that Persephone had died that summer, a sudden illness. I hadn't known. I drove to the attorney's office the next morning. The attorney called me in and placed an envelope on the desk between us, and I just stared at it. The attorney slid the envelope across the desk toward me. I picked it up and my fingers were not steady. I opened it and pulled out 3 pages of handwritten paper, Persephone's handwriting. Neat and small and careful. The letter was dated 4 months before she died. I looked up at the attorney and she just nodded at me, so I read it. The first line hit me so hard I had to read it twice. Persephone wrote, "I have hated you for 6 years. I want you to know that before I say anything else. I hated you because you wouldn't stop, because you made my life unbearable, because you cost me my position, my reputation, and my standing in a community I'd spent a decade building. I hated you because you were right, and I couldn't admit it." I had to put the letter down for a second. Then I picked it back up and kept reading. Persephone wrote that after Octavia was moved to the private school, something changed in her daughter. She didn't just get quiet, she went silent. She stopped eating meals with the family. She stopped making eye contact with her father. Persephone said she thought it was the trauma of the move. For 2 years, she believed that. Then, 2 years ago, Octavia started therapy. And in therapy, Octavia told her therapist something that broke Persephone's entire world open. Octavia disclosed that she had been abused by her father, Persephone's husband, since she was 6 years old. I read that sentence and my hand went to my mouth. Persephone wrote, "The bullying your daughter experienced was my daughter's only outlet, the only place in her life where she had any power. I am not excusing it. I am telling you what I now understand." The letter kept going. Persephone wrote that the moment she learned the truth, she filed for divorce. That same week, her husband fought for custody. He denied everything. He hired attorneys who tried to make Persephone look unstable, and Persephone, who was already sick by then, spent her final year alive building a case against him. She wrote, "I could not undo what happened to your daughter, but I could make sure what happened to mine would never be ignored again." And then came the part that broke me completely. Persephone wrote that the only reason Octavia ever went to therapy was because of the move to the private school. The new school required counseling for transfer students. That counseling led to a therapist Octavia trusted. That therapist gave Octavia the space to finally say what had been happening to her. And the move, Persephone wrote, only happened because of me, because I showed up to every board meeting because I would not stop. Persephone wrote, "You kept a promise to your daughter, and in doing so, you saved mine. I will never be able to say this to your face. I am too proud, and I am too sick, but I need you to know." I put the letter down. I was crying, not quietly, the kind of crying where your whole body shakes. The attorney sat there and let me. When I could finally talk again, the attorney told me about the bequest. It was not money. Persephone had left me a sealed, signed affidavit that she had filed in advance with the prosecutor's office before she died. The affidavit detailed, with dates and corroborating witnesses, exactly what her husband had done to Octavia. The attorney looked at me across the desk and said, "This was the document the prosecutor's office had been waiting on to file the final felony charges. Mrs. Neves prepared it before she passed, specifically so it could not be challenged or withdrawn." My voice was barely a whisper when I asked, "What happens now?" The attorney folded her hands on the desk and said, "He was arrested Tuesday. I drove home in a fog. I parked in the driveway and I didn't get out of the car right away. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel, thinking about Colton, who called it a haircut, Mallory, who said I was embarrassing the family, Robin, who told me I was impossible. I thought about Persephone, who hated me for 6 years and then thanked me with the most powerful thing she had left. I thought about 2 little girls, one whose hair was cut in a bathroom, one whose silence hid something no child should carry. And I thought about what Marigold told me all those years ago. The only words that ever mattered. You're the only adult who did what they said they'd do." I kept a promise. It cost me friendships, my reputation, my standing, and nearly my marriage. It saved 2 children. I would do it again. 3 weeks after the attorney's office, a second envelope arrived, hand-delivered. No postage, just my name on the front in handwriting I had not seen in years. Inside was a single page folded twice, and a Polaroid photograph clipped to the corner. The photo was of 3 little girls at what looked like a school field day, Marigold, Octavia, and a third girl in the middle, smaller than the other 2, holding both their hands. On the back of the photo, in Persephone's handwriting, was a date from 4 years before the haircut and one line, "Ask Octavia who the third girl was. She is the reason I kept the affidavit sealed until I did."